On this week's episode of TalkStone,
we recap the last ever HCT Seasonal Championship.
We needed the Tiebreaker Tussle, but we finally have our field of 16 for the World Championship.
And as always, we present this week's well-played moment and, of course, meme history.
Everybody, get in here. Let's break down all the esports action. Welcome to TalkStone, your premier source for all things competitive Hearthstone news and analysis. My name is Frodan.
And I'm TJ.
And this is our last seasonal championship breakdown. In fact, it does include all the playoffs and whatnot. It's just a wrap-up of the Year of the Raven going into the World Championships. Let's go ahead and give some initial thoughts and reactions to this news, TJ. I know this is a very sentimental thing for you personally because as a Hearthstone caster that kind of basically went through it all. I think you've casted all the opens, you've done the large invitationals, you've traveled overseas, done it online. I mean, heck, I even remember you doing the championships for Americas remotely on the secondary stream.
Yep.
Was it with Dart that you casted?
It was with Dart, yeah. Oh, man.
This was back when Admirable competed
the
in the
Hammerstein Ballroom, 2014.
2014. The year that Firebat won. This is our
Yeah.
first World Championship campaign. And I remember Admirable was a top 16 player at that event.
He was.
And you were casting online remotely. So you've kind of gone through it all. And I remember you kept telling me throughout the years that playoffs and champs were just your favorite thing to cast.
Yeah.
So go ahead and give me your thoughts on.
Yeah, it's a little bit sad to see it go. Obviously, I'm excited for the new system. You know, I joined the Hearthstone Esports team 2 years ago, so I got to see the planning from the ground up for the new system. And I am excited about it, but of course, anything that you get your start in and see it all the way to the finish, you'll always be sad when it goes away. Mm-hmm. And playoffs and championships were always special because, and I think you said this on the broadcast, is just because of the work that it takes to get there, right? You have to earn the points necessary to qualify for playoffs. You have to go to playoffs. You have to be in the top 4 out of 70 plus of the best competitors in your region. And then you have to go to a championship a few months later and compete in a 16-player pool to get those 4 spots to the World Championship with some of the best players in the world. So you always knew that it was a tough path to get there, and I just loved seeing it from start to finish every season. And for that reason, I'll miss it. But I think we did go out with a bang. I think we had a lot of fun on the broadcast this past weekend. Maybe even too much fun.
Definitely too much fun, if you ask me.
But it was still a fun way to go out.
I think you had a little too much fun.
I always have a little too much fun.
I feel like almost every cold open that we do, for people who missed the Winter Championship, we basically have largely turned a expert and analysis desk into a very scuffed version of Saturday Night Live sketches. We're basically like, the wannabe Lonely Island group at this point.
Yeah.
With TJ being our Andy Samberg. And we just basically do a bunch of random inside jokes as content, and for some reason, they keep hiring us.
Well, they work. I think that they're fun. They're funny.
For the be a little biased.
For the 10 people in the audience that did see where those jokes originated, it's hilarious.
Yeah, well, 5 of them are the other casters, TJ.
True.
And like 2 of them are the production crew.
All right, so 3 of the people in the audience that have seen it from the beginning know exactly what's going on. It's funny, but I like those. I like doing those. It's fun.
Yeah. Did your mom ever commentate on it? Because for people who don't know, TJ's mother is also a performer.
She is.
And she used to watch a lot of TJ's shows back in the day, and she used to actually send TJ messages about me.
Yeah.
Saying like, "Oh, I really like that that random Asian guy you cast with." And then TJ,
her words, not Dan's.
Yeah, it was actually Monk the entire time.
Yeah.
TJ was like, "Yeah, my mom watches all my shows." Does she still do that after years later?
She still watches a good amount. So does my dad actually now.
Oh, that's awesome.
He got into it.
So does Oliver watch too?
No. Well, actually, he watched with my wife over the weekend because she just puts it on the TV and watches in the background. And she'll send me pictures of him like watching on the TV. But
that's cute.
He's 7 months old. He doesn't know anything.
Yeah. For people who don't know, Oliver is TJ's 6-month-old baby at this point?
7. Yeah.
He's getting
well,
big.
Between 6 and 7. Between 6
so
and
he's
7 months.
Almost ready to open his first pre-order, I believe.
Yes.
I think what is it? 9 months?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to? It'll line up perfectly.
Actually, Dan, Hearthstone is rated T for teen.
Ah, really? I thought it was E for everyone.
And as a strict parent of my 7-month-old son, who gets in a lot of mischief, He's not allowed to play Hearthstone until he's 35.
Okay, before we, not to get too derailed, this is the last story, I promise. But I visited my sister, who recently also gave birth, around the same time, actually, about a month after Karen did, your wife. And it was our first grandchild of our family, so it's a really big deal. And I get to meet him for one of the first times. And I was like, oh, so take a picture, like to commemorate this moment. I'm an uncle, blah, blah, blah. And my mom was like super happy. And my sister's like, wait, before you take that picture, you have to know I do not want my baby's picture to be on social media. So please find a way to block it out. So, Twitter doesn't have many great tools, but they have smiley face emojis. So I decided to put it over the baby's face. And then not like 2 minutes later after I post this, like, I'm an uncle now, smiley face. With the baby picture face covered, TJ posts like a bunch of pictures of his baby and how he's trolling him on social media the entire time. And then Derek Brown, another HCT caster, captured this in one timeline tweet and wrote, "There are two kinds of people in this world."
Yeah.
So I just thought it was a little funny dynamic there, back and forth. Anyways, back into Winter Championships, because you can tell me and TJ clearly have problems staying on track here, so we hope that our producer can hold us accountable. Let's talk a little bit about the results to start things off. So the first thing that I want to call out, TJ, is that all 4 regions finally showed up. It took 3 years, but we finally attained the balance that we were looking for in terms of regional representation. 16 players, 4 from each region, 8 players in the top 8, 2 from each region, top 4, 1 from each region.
Yeah,
Doesn't get better than that.
And if you look at the overall, we always throw up the records by region graphic. It was around 50% even for the bottom 2, which was Americas and Asia Pacific, which is really cool to see. And most of the championships that we've ever broadcast has always told a story of one region dominating over another. Even if you look back throughout 2018, in summer it was all about the dominance of Europe. We had Bunny Hopper, Viper, and A8 all in the top 4. And then if you went to the Fall Championship, it was all about the dominance of Americas. We had Bloody Face, we had Language Hacker, we had Just Saying in the top 4. So this season, I was expecting something to be shaken up. I was honestly expecting China to do really well, and they did. They were the top record, but they didn't get too much. They didn't get as much representation in that top 4, or even to the World Championship as we saw Americas or Europe did in the previous seasons. But it was just cool to see them and Asia Pacific step up in a big way, and Asia Pacific ended up taking the entire tournament with Roger being the winner.
Yeah, it was more. I mean, it's more of a victory for the East. I think you always get better. Like in Hearthstone, I feel like a player is often as strong as his practice group. If the player is by himself, he has to be like an absolutely brilliant, like, one-of-a-kind genius. And I look at players like Kalento, for example, who, like, really just does not practice very much with other people. He usually takes his own experiences. But at the same time, I think Kalento's experienced a lot more stiff competition these days, because when you go up against a player, if I play against TJ, I'm not going up against just TJ these days in the Taiwan show match of the Hearthstone All-Stars. I'm going against the people he talks to. And TJ hangs out with, the likes of Muzzy and Ike and Saiyan and Amnesiac. Same thing with Admirable, and same thing with like all these other players. They just have a group of support, and then when you're competing against them, it's really tough. So I really like that the East was able to finally show up, and maybe what's really cool is that that's starting to change a little bit. One thing that really stuck out to me during the interviews was the players were picking Xiao Ti as a top player in the world, and that's really fascinating considering that they can't even talk to him very much about Hearthstone. Like the communication is limited. And that's just unusual for someone from the West that's very respected, like Bunny Hopper, to pick Xiao Ti when everyone's like, no, Bunny Hopper's the best player in this tournament. He's one of the best players in the world. Yeah,
and, just to that last point that you made, we have had more exposure as of late because we have had, like, English broadcasts of some of the invitationals in China and, like the China versus Korea invitational. So we have had more insight into it. And also, a lot of European players traveled over there, late last year, I think, for Europe versus China. And they get to interact firsthand. They get to play against a lot of the players from China. And I think that's kind of where that comes into now, is we do have more exposure than we did in the past, but still probably not enough. But we'll see how that shapes up in the future. And one last point on this before we move on to the breakdown is I was looking to see if Tom winning the World Championship last year would inspire kind of a new wave of Taiwanese players. And we have seen that happen now.
Absolutely.
We saw Blood Trail make a pretty dominant performance throughout 2018, qualifying for the World Championship, winning the Taiwan All-Stars event, and now Roger winning a seasonal championship. I think that's a big deal, and I don't know if it was because Tom inspired them to win, but at the very least, it put Hearthstone more so on the map in Taiwan, which makes people be a little bit more motivated at the very least.
After Tom won the World Championship a little over a year ago in Amsterdam, he got recognized by the president of the country, which is pretty sweet, to say the least, for being able to win. Also, he won a lot of money, and he was able to follow up that performance by making playoffs every year or every season this year. But I do want to say that Taiwan has also historically been a very strong country in general. You look at 2014, Tom 60229 was part of the World Championship in 2014 along with Frozen Ice. And then you have players even with an HCT open system like UCCU was able to go through, or Malagos TW, or Samuel Tsao, who made a run almost as far as Tom. But Tom had to eliminate Samuel Tsao in the quarterfinals of last year's World Championship. So I think Taiwan always has great talent. People kind of lump Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau as one region, but specifically Taiwan, in my opinion, has always been a heavy lifter. There's a fantastic amount of players in Asia Pacific that don't get enough opportunities, and I always feel like that was the limiting factor. I believe this year, I said multiple times during a seasonal championship that this would probably be the year of Asia Pacific based off that inspiration of Tom.
Yep.
And, to a certain extent, there are some more Asia Pacific stars rising up, but it's just Asia as a whole. China starts stepping up too. I've been very impressed by Ye Ying. I think he made the World Championship. We'll talk about him more in a little bit. But also just the quality of players that were able to come through. I think Tsai Miao, definitely a solid player. I can't wait to see if China can follow up this momentum because, 2 years in a row now, TJ, we've had someone in China in the semifinals.
Yep.
And I think the players that are coming can also do that come April for the Taiwan Championship.
I agree. Jing as well, and we'll talk more about him. But let's dive into the group breakdown.
Sure.
And we'll get through these pretty quickly. But Group A, Viper, Noblord, Yu Ying, and Tansoku. And this group was pretty interesting because it had a large mix of lineups. Viper coming in with a aggro lineup, but with Malagos Rogue.
Yeah. I want to call it like a Chinese-inspired lineup. So one of the championships, I believe this was actually as recent as the most previous season in fall, the Chinese players brought 3 aggressive decks and a Malagos Druid. And it was kind of interesting because we're like, if you're going to bring aggro decks and you want to target a strategy that's weak to aggro, wouldn't you want to just play all aggro? And they said that, well, one, Malagos Druid was just like almost too good not to bring. But 2, is because the strategy was to punish specific slow decks, and Malagos Druid at the time, and to be honest, still now, is really good at beating those slow control decks or those slower combo decks. And now Viper has the same thing where it's like he doesn't necessarily just want to punish like a slow mid-range hunter, for example, with aggressive decks. He also wants to beat the combo decks that are out there with one of the fastest combo decks that are possibly out there in the meta. Like Malagos Rogue can kill on turn 5 or 6 if the stars align. It's like way better than the turn 9 Clone Priest. It's way better than like the Twig with Malagos Druid on 10. It gets pretty nutty pretty quick.
Yeah, it does. And actually, the Malagos Rogue ended up being his downfall, but not for the reason you'd expect. He didn't lose against the fast aggro decks. He ended up losing against the other slow combo decks because he couldn't get the job done. And then later on in the tournament, Malagos Rogue, when he did play against the aggro lineups that we thought would give him some issues, that wasn't even the downfall either. It was the Murloc Paladin. So it was kind of a little bit of a backwards scenario for him, but he did make it out of groups in second place, and the player that made it out of groups in first place, which you had mentioned that he had impressed you a lot, was Yu Ying. So he had the most, I think, one of the most unique lineups because he was just kind of an all-around good lineup player. He had some fast decks that weren't too fast, right, to be targeting the anti-control decks. But then he also had control decks, but they were hedged anti-aggro. So it was like he had all of these middle-of-the-road decks.
Yeah, he had like Odd Rogue, Malagos Druid. I think the way I described Yu Ying's lineup is that he lived under the rock lineup for 2 months. He forgot that all these nerfs came in, like Cold Blood came in and nerfed Odd Rogue, and of course Wild Growth and Nourish and Spreading Plague and Innervate, and every card in that deck.
Literally every card
at this point.
Almost every card.
I was like, so he's kind of like, I'm gonna handicap myself willingly, and submit this lineup, even if it seems outdated in theory. And played extremely well. And so I was very impressed by Ying. I also was really rooting for Tansoku because I just like the guy a lot. He's very approachable, very relatable. And, actually, here's a little funny story. Tansoku, he ended up bombing out of groups here, so a little bit sad for him. But at the very end of the event, after the championship has been finished and we all went back to the hotel, TJ's like, hey, I got to go home and take care of my family. I'm like, okay, great. Obviously responsible adult. Tonsoku and the translator were greeting us in the hotel lobby and asked all the cashers to sign his phone case. And guess who wasn't there?
Me!
TJ wasn't there, and he was the only person that signed Tonsoku's phone case the last championship he came. And so he's like, oh, no, I can't. I specifically stayed just to get all 6 cashers to sign my phone case this time. And TJ, my hero, wasn't here. I'm like, well, if you combine both phone cases, you have all 6.
Yes.
But this time around,
I'm going to personally sign a phone case and send it to Tansoku just so he can have it.
Yeah, that's true. Or we can maybe the best way to do it is just to give a digital copy of it so he can print it out and label it that way.
Yeah.
But that's just a little funny aside. Noblord definitely played below his expected level. I think this guy was one of the dark horses of the event. I had a lot of faith in his technical ability, and it turns out his technical ability became his downfall. He made a lot of mistakes, even just straight up thrown games. But the thing that I liked most about Noblord was that he was the most critical about himself. He immediately posted, like, I watched all my games and realized I made this mistake, and kept going on and on and on about it. I was like, geez, man. Most people, they just like to internalize that. Like, okay, I know my mistakes. And then they tweet out, like, one simple summary. Made a lot of mistakes, didn't deserve to win, going to come back stronger. But Noblord just bears his entire soul in front of the entire internet, just saying, you know what, these are like the 15 things I messed up, and, sucks to lose.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang, this is very raw, and I was very appreciative of that.
Yeah, so was I. Even asked him about it in his interview, and he said, you know what, I'm going to give another analysis for you later today. But Noblord also had a few, I think, gaping holes in his lineup where he had one deck in his lineup that was very weak to anti-control, which was the Odd Warrior. So he already had a disadvantage going against the anti-control lineups. And then he had APM Priest, which had a big gaping hole against aggro decks. So it was like, in every series, he went in as the underdog. It felt like.
Right, yeah. It felt like a couple of things had to fall his way in order to, be able to escape out. I mean, I don't think it was a terrible idea to bring Odd Warrior because we saw Definition go very far with Odd Warrior. But you did bring a good point. And, even though Noblord doesn't make it through, I think he is a player still to watch out in the future because he just has such a good mind for the game. And I think those players are really scary because they come out of nowhere and just destroy those opens or whenever they go to a tour stop. So keep your eye out for him in the future. For Group B, we have Jing, Bloodyface, Faeli, and Tyler. This is actually a group that I thought was the hardest group. And after watching Jing play his first series, I said, oh, this is definitely the group of death.
Yeah.
And I think it was highlighted by the fact that actually specifically Jing, brought a very weird Zoo Warlock deck featuring Grim Rally. It almost felt like a token Warlock at one point, where it was just like trying to go so wide onto the board and utilize the +1/+1 buff that you get from Grim Rally and sacrificing a minion. There was a little bit of faltering at the finish line, but Jing ended up ultimately making the top 4, getting first in the group, and I think he was a standout performer. Even though Bloodyface got just as far, and even though we all know how good Faeli and Tyler is, I felt like Jing was a standout player.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And I even think going up until he was knocked out of the tournament in the semifinals, he still was playing really well. It's just he had some really poor payouts with the Zoo Warlock that ultimately was his downfall, where at one point he had like double Grim Rally in his hand, and he was just trying to search for some answers against Bunny Hopper. and it didn't work out. But also got to commend him for just that creative lineup building and capitalizing on what he saw as a hole in the meta.
It speaks a lot about a player's decision-making with his decks. When other players in the tournament are talking about what you brought and say, oh, I wish I knew about that deck, I would have brought it too. I think 3 people mentioned that, and they all happened to be more aggressive lineups. You know, Bloody Face was like, yeah, I was looking for aggro lineups. I just couldn't figure it out. And I think Jing brought like a format-breaking deck. That's a very high compliment, saying like, this is the best deck that's undiscovered right now. You know, and Bunny Hopper was thinking the same things. Like, yeah, you know, like even though that, you know, he didn't have as high praise as Bloody Face, but he's like, I was looking for an aggressive deck, and I realized that there were better options out there. And most people don't think about that when they bring a Warlock deck. It's Cube Warlock. It's even Warlock. I mean, people were even considering Mechathune Warlock if it wasn't so vulnerable to certain strategies that are out there in the metagame. People weren't really considering Zoo, a timeless classic. For only a limited time, too, because of the Hall of Fame announcement. I'm going to miss Doomguard. I'm sure Admirable's going to miss Doomguard a lot. And I think Jing gave it one last good spin, at least at a championship, before we rotated out in Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And going down that group a little more, Tyler, he just had a tough tournament, man. He didn't play up to what we know is its standard. Ended up being the 0-2, the last place in that group. Granted, it was a tough group, but there was some pretty obvious missteps from Tyler along the way. And, you know, he's qualified for the World Championship. He's had a tough couple of months, and I think nobody even would have expected him, especially with what he's been going through in his personal life and how little prep he was able to do going into the playoffs. Nobody even expected him to make it to this point. And honestly, nobody would have blamed him if he didn't even try.
Right.
So I think that Tyler just needs to kind of forget about this appearance at the Winter Championship and look forward to Worlds with a little bit more time and a little bit more prep under his belt.
Right. For Tyler fans out there, I think, you know, it's understandable based off his performance. And, you know, he did go 0-2, like you mentioned, and he has been taking a few months to kind of you know, move past the grieving phase of what happened to his father, which our hearts still go out to him and his family. That being said, I'm kind of glad that it panned out the way it did for multiple reasons. The first is that, TJ, if you don't bring good decks and you don't play well, in my opinion, you don't deserve to win.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that happened to Tyler. He didn't bring meta-cutting decks. In fact, he got very lazy with his preparation. He said, I just brought the same decks that I basically brought to the playoffs. And I was like, well, the meta evolved. I mean, there's an entire nerf patch that came through and changed the metagame, and you're just going to bring the same exact thing and hope it works. So, well, he didn't bring the same exact thing. He didn't bring even Shaman. But, you know, he basically just copy-paste effectively the same concept, just odd and even decks and just do whatever. So there's one. Two, Tyler had a lot of missteps where it just looked like he was unfamiliar with some late-game scenarios. And to his credit, if you've never seen those, they're very hard to navigate through. But that also goes to show you that diligence and practice can come up big, especially in those unconventional scenarios. And you contrast that with Bunny Hopper, who was put in many weird late-game scenarios, and he seemed to navigate it almost perfectly. I'm sure there's a couple of small errors he could have optimized. But it's like you want to get close to perfect as you can in those really wonky scenarios, and we'll talk more about that in the group stages. And then the third thing is that I love that this will be an opportunity for Tyler to be motivated and realize he can't just coast. There are some players that when they qualify, they do tend to take it a lot easier. They take their foot off the gas pedal and say, you know what, I'm already qualified, so I'm not going to put as much effort. I trust my practice, and I'm not going to put as much reps in. And it's a delicate balance because some players it helps. For example, I think Muzzy was a player that definitely over-practiced. He played way too much Hearthstone. I think he was experiencing some burnout. So him easing up on the gas pedal actually helped him start achieving those results.
Yes.
And it helped him have a more balanced mindset. And it has happened for Neria as well. Neria was like a player that got top 10 legend on both servers every season. And then the moment he started relaxing, he started making the championships back-to-back. I think nowadays he relaxes a little too much. So I think he's gone off the deep end on that. But, I mean, I think Tyler was gradually getting to that point where he was known to play a bunch of games and grind and then started getting a little complacent. So I hope this lights a fire under him and is able to get him ready for the World Championship, because if he does the same thing of just like, you know what, it's post-rotation, I'm just going to go with the low-hanging fruit, play like day one decks, I think he's going to get stomped at World Championships if he carries that mentality, TJ.
Yeah, and Tyler even said in our interview with him when we sit down with the players that he prefers to have a fresh meta when going into a tournament, because he likes to capitalize on working really hard in those first couple weeks to find a hole in the metagame and then capitalizing on that. So I think that Tyler's going to do well at Worlds, and I think he just needs to hold his head up from here.
To add to your example, Tyler did bring like a very interesting variant of Token Druid back when he'd made his first championship run.
Yeah, you're right.
And he was the one taking a risk and saying, you know what, I think you bring the Stone Shell Scavengers, and I think you build like this more taunt-oriented version of Token Druid. And a lot of people are like, no, you just play the classic Token Druid. That's just good. And Tyler just wrecked the entire field with that, and then people started copying that result. And so I think Tyler will come out really strong for the World Championship. I'm just saying I hope he doesn't continue the same kind of preparation, which I don't think he will. I'm just kind of setting that storyline up in case one or the other happens.
Yeah. Well, we have some time. He's got some time, and we'll see what ends up happening. But Faeli ended up going 1-2, barely not making out of groups. Faeli, he had decent decks. I mean, you saw what a similar lineup of his was able to accomplish into the finals, but there was a couple holes, and I think Q-Block was definitely one of them. Q-Block definitely struggled. Basically, all the non-Zoo variants of Warlock struggled, and it was just Cube and Even. Because they kind of got beat up by everything. They got beat up by the aggressive strategies, and they also got beat up by the anti-control list, because nowadays, in the current Hearthstone meta, combo decks reign supreme, right? Combo decks just feel faster. They feel like they have multiple win conditions outside of just piecing together a combo. And Cube Warlock just seems like one of those decks that is just a little too bad at everything to get the job done. Unless they have Skull on 5, your opponent doesn't have weapon destruction, and you win the game very, very quickly, it falters a lot.
Because his technical play is perfectly fine.
His technical play was great, and it just so happened that his lineup wasn't able to get the job done.
You know, Malagos, Druid, Cube Warlock, those are just vulnerable spots that could go wrong disastrously. So you have to be very, very cautious with what you bring. I do appreciate the risk, though. I do appreciate it.
Yeah. And last player in Group B was Bloodyface. Bloodyface still made a top 4 appearance, still looked like he is a solid player, but he did underperform based off of how much we were hyping him up coming out of Fall Championship. He looked like the best player in that tournament, and no shade to Language Hacker, because Language Hacker played very well and obviously deserved his victory. But Bloodyface was the player that proved that he could make creative plays in bizarre situations. Language Hacker had a great meta read, played like nearly perfectly throughout the tournament, but Bloodyface made those couple of next-level plays that stand out in your mind for a long time. And this tournament, I honestly think he made a lot of plays where I just had just slapped a big question mark on him, because they just didn't seem like the Bloodyface that I knew. And I think that's honestly because we had talked to him in his interview, and he said it was really hard to find practice partners. He said he didn't have a good support network coming in, and oftentimes he resorted to practicing against himself to practice his lineup, which
further increases your biases.
It further increases your biases. It also is very hard to separate your brain from convincing yourself you don't know what's in your own hand on the other side of the table. And a lot of the points that you made earlier about the repetition, knowing spots, being able to see spots in certain games, which only come after hundreds, thousands of games on a deck. It blurs those lines because you were seeing it from two perspectives. And I don't know for sure, but I think that's probably what caused this underperformance. But we call it an underperformance, but he still made top 4. So that should tell you something about our expectations.
Definitely a good way to wrap up Group B. Going to Group C, we have Definition, who ended up in first place, Ike in second, Time Meow in third, and ThunderUp from fourth. I think in terms of the like technical skill level, this definitely was the biggest wild card, because we don't know how good ThunderUp and Definition can be, given that they're more rookies onto the HCT Championship stage. I mean, they've been in playoffs, but we didn't really hear much about them. And Definition looked good in the beginning. I think he crushed his group and he felt very good. I mean, granted, he did match up against Ike in the winners match, and Ike was saying, like, I just don't want to play against Definition. He's like one of 2 lineups I just don't want to hit. And it ended up being the case. Time Meow coming in at third. I think he was another disappointment, similar to like a Tyler or Nobler, which like this guy is just not playing as good as we know he can. Because the previous championship, we all agreed as talent and even as a lot of the players that time he outperformed the best out of all the Chinese players that
Mm-hmm.
represented, even though none of them made it. I don't know what happened here, DJ. I'm kind of lost a little bit. He missed lethals. He was a little bit off on his macro game plan, where he's just utilizing resources, not recognizing opportunities to be aggressive, or maybe being too aggressive. He just looked off.
He did look off, and he also suffered from kind of a similar fate that we talked about with Faeli, where he had the Q block in his lineup, which he had some of the more dominant games on Q block with the whole I play Skull and 5, you lose type of situation, but pretty much every other deck that he played, he missed a lot of spots. With Quest Rogue, I have played a lot of Quest Rogue, and I've talked with a lot of players about Quest Rogue, Killing All Day specifically, and Tare. That's basically where that was my Quest Rogue dojo, was a call with Tare and Killing All Day, and I honestly think that he didn't play at a championship level with at least a few of his decks, and that's not what we've known from him. And maybe it's because we heard in his player interview that he didn't practice as much as he probably could have leading up to this event. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what happened. But
I think Dex had a large thing to do with it, but it's also technical play. So I think it just means like overall a subpar performance relative to the expectations that we have from him.
Yeah.
Looking at Thunder Up, I can't pinpoint one thing exactly either. There's definitely some lines that looked a little indecisive and going one way and then changing his game plan altogether. Yeah. I wasn't particularly against his lineup. But at the same time, it didn't feel like it was well fitted for the meta.
It was the same case that you made before, where it was kind of like an old lineup.
Right.
This is like a 2 month ago good lineup where he had Secret Hunter, the only player to bring it. He had Even Warlock, Odd Rogue, and Control Priest. So those were 4 very dominant decks for playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah, and Thunder Up said that part of the reason why he brought this lineup was because he spent so much time traveling to get his visa, because in Turkey, unfortunately, it's not very easy to travel to the U.S. or even just travel out of that country. So he spent a lot of time traveling, being away from his friends and family and his significant other. And he was like, I don't really have a lot of chance to practice, unfortunately. So I had to bring stuff that I knew for a fact how to play with the back of my hand. I think that just means that he's naturally behind, though. He has to have certain panouts. And when Spellstone's a turn later, when Odd Rogue doesn't have Cold Blood, and Control Priest is largely muscled out unless you somehow miraculously line up against an Even Warlock. Yeah. It's a difficult lineup to achieve a lot of good results. So he had to get some really good, fortunate matchups, and I don't think he got any of them. So I think it's logical that he ended up 4th here.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. And final player for Group C was Ike.
Definitely not last.
Definitely not last.
Definitely
and
not least.
Ike, he was so confident in the Odd Paladin. He loves Odd Paladin. He's like, this is just a good deck. I kind of, prepared for this tournament holistically. Mm-hmm. He prepared for it given that he could not expect what the field would be. He just brought what he thought were the best decks in the metagame, and Odd Paladin was one of those. And boy, did it struggle. And I don't want to say it struggled based off its win rate. I want to say that every match seemed like it was on a razor's edge. Every match seemed like it hinged upon one draw, one thing happening. It was so close. And, Admirable, who's a big fan of Ike, he streams with him all the time, talks with him. Just watching Admirable watch Ike's games just made me nervous because of how crazy it got at times.
I was telling people in the backstage that Admirable wanted Ike to win more than Ike did.
Yeah.
Like, he was just screaming and roaring and stroking his beard. And, he was popping off. The tiebreaker between Ike and Definition. I've never seen Admirable more invested, other than the one time Firebat won that World Championship.
Yeah.
Which is another meme history for another day. Let's wrap up Group D here. We've been kind of running over time. Bunny Hopper, first place. Expected result. Brought an aggro lineup. No one was prepared for the aggro lineup. Crushed it. Enough said. Roger ended number 2, and I think he just ended up getting on the right side of a lot of the mirror matchups. But at the same time, I do feel like Lion King and Bobby X, Even though Roger did have some shaky series, like for example, I think he should have actually beaten Bunny Hopper in their head-to-head for the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Lion King and Bobby X also didn't deliver as much as they could have, and they also brought some decks which could be vulnerable. Like Bobby X's Malagos Druid ended up losing a lot.
Yeah.
And like I just was pretty underwhelmed outside of Bunny Hopper in this group.
Yeah.
Someone had to get second place.
Yeah. And Roger and Lion King actually brought nearly card for card exact
Same
lineups.
thing, right. But then Roger kept winning the mirrors.
But Roger kept winning the mirrors. And, it was you can sometimes it's part of the matchups, but I honestly think Roger just played those matchups better. Yep. And it felt like Roger was powering up as the tournament went on. He had a really rough group performance, especially in his matchup against Bunny Hopper. I don't know if he got in his own head or what, or if he was on autopilot. But he had some of the roughest games I've seen, specifically the Questroke versus Even Paladin game, where it just felt like he was just making plays. He wasn't even thinking about it because he figured once he completed quests that he would win. But against a player of Bunny Hopper's caliber, you cannot do that. You have to have everything buttoned up, or he's going to exploit you forever.
He's
and
that's for a punish. Yep.
Yeah, it's exactly what Bunny Hopper did. He took Even Paladin and beat Questroke in fatigue because Roger just, kind of flubbed at the end and didn't keep track of his resources.
Yeah, it was like he had like 6 Novice Engineers in the end of his hand, or at the end of the game, and he has 0 cards in his deck, and that's like the only minion he has left. So we're just like, well, this only ends in one way, taking 1,500 fatigue damage.
You should never lose in fatigue with Lab Recruiter in your deck.
Right.
Even though Valera was in his bottom 6, you still should be able to, in that case, with how good his start was with Sonya, with South Sea Deckhand, completing the quest on time, enough lifesteal in his hand to sustain the game.
Yep.
But I think that motivated him. And like I said, Roger powered up throughout the tournament and took that to heart.
That's honestly kind of like the story of a lot of these Asian players. When they travel, and they don't travel very often, they sometimes just get better as the days go by because they get more used to the schedule, and then they kind of get the competition under the belt.
Yeah.
Same thing with Blood Trail, too. Blood Trail seemed to get a lot better as the championships continued, for the one that he actually showed up to. The other one where he didn't show up to and kept playing Kelseth and Stitch Tracker incorrectly, we won't talk much more about that. We beat that dead horse. Let's quickly break down the top 8. You mentioned Roger was on a rampage. He ended on top with a 9-1 score in top 8. That is dominance. It was like a good combination of the right draws, the right plays, and momentum seemingly to just be on his side. A little bit of an underwhelming anticlimactic grand finals, but you know what? We got a lot of mileage at that tiebreaker tussle, DJ. Can we talk about that for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
So in
the
top
tiebreaker
4,
tussle.
In the top 4, we had Bloodyface, Roger, Jing, and Bunny Hopper. And Bloodyface and Bunny Hopper are already world bound by the previous seasons. Bunny Hopper from winter, Bloodyface from the fall season. So we had to play for the top for 2 more spots. But Viper had already also qualified, and he made top 8. Therefore, instead of 4 players playing for 2 spots, we had 3 players. This set up a really awkward bracket scenario because if it was 4 players, it's very simple. You just have 2 matches, and then whoever wins just goes to the
whoever wins just goes through.
Whoever goes through. So what we did was he essentially seeded one player ahead of everyone, as if he played a bye player, like that player got disqualified, and you just played a normal HCT group. So you have to win 2, or basically whoever loses twice gets eliminated.
Yes.
And then those 2 players. That was so dramatic the way it happened, because Definition beat Ike for the 2nd time that tournament, plays Ying, which is one of the coolest series of the tournament, and he loses, and then he plays Ike again for the 3rd time this tournament, loses this match, and is now out of contention for the World Championship. Ike gets the 16th spot. Definition loses to Ike once this tournament, does not get the World Championship spot. And to add insult to injury, he also lost against Roger in the top 8, which would have given him a championship spot. So this guy had 3
chances
to go to the World Championship and lost all 3. That is soul-crushing, to say the least.
And as I said, Roger kind of powered up as the tournament went on. It honestly seemed like Definition unraveled.
He powered down.
Yeah. And I honestly think it was just him, no experience, right? He earned nearly all of his points with his ladder finishes. He got, out of a 6-month period, he got 5 top 10 finishes,
right?
Which is insane. but that doesn't translate to tournament play. And in the group stages, he was kind of just on autopilot. And in a good way, he was playing decks that he was comfortable with. He was wrecking people with Hakar Druid, making good reads, doing some crazy plays. And then those complicated decks that I know he has a lot of practice on and he knows very well, his brain just kind of, with all the pressure, with 3 chances to get a world championship spot, every single one he lost, the next series he just looked more stressed. And it ultimately culminated.
3 series in a row for the tiebreaker too, which is also like
brutal.
A real fatigue concern because you just look at how emotionally invested he gets into it. Hands on his face constantly, looking away from the screen to try to take a deep breath. That kind of stuff, it's just all symptoms of a person that's trying to fight his inner demons. And I mean, we've watched Surrender a lot, but Surrender has so much experience now that he's no longer the nervous, frantic player that we used to see. Back when Surrender first competed, I heard so much hype about it, but he just never really delivered to the level of expectations from his teammates. Hoy and Sixo would always talk about. Finally, last year I think he really came into his own and started streaming a lot more and finally became accustomed and adjusted to it. I really hope Definition learns from this and comes back stronger. Because even though Yaying and I get the spot, Definition was the closest out of anybody, I think, to get a World Championship spot and missed it. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of moments make or break players. Either that becomes his motivation to come back and people remember his name despite his shortcomings, or that's just the last we've ever heard of this guy. Yeah. Because it's just too hard to come back. And I think this is where he'll truly be tested. He thought the hardest part was losing. The hardest part is getting back on your feet.
Yeah, and with Definition losing, we also have come to an end of an era because we're left without a Korean representative at the World Championship for the first time.
That's right. We had Kranich for back-to-back years, which is very impressive early on. And then we had Dahyoni and Handsome Guy 2016, and then 2017. For Amsterdam was Surrender, who put on quite the performance, and everyone thought that was the beginning of the end for Hearthstone Esports. Like, oh no, Korea's going to take over. Surrender's so good. And they honestly kept delivering. There's a lot of quality players from Korea. You're looking at Koko Sasa, who's always made really deep runs, and everyone looks at Surrender, and there's just a lot of talent in that region. And they're also really fun to watch. I gotta say, the invitationals with for Gerwins and Daihoni are always such a blast. I don't know how they keep making Discard Warlock win in those matchups or doing really memey stuff all the time. But I fully expect Korea to make a bounce back in the following years, because if there's one thing Koreans hate more than anything, it's losing.
Yes.
They hate losing so much. So, good luck to Definition, good luck to the rest of South Korea, but we're going to have to move on to the World Championship without them this year. So with that, TJ, any final thoughts to close the championships before we preview a little bit about the 16 Worlds players?
Yeah, we kind of memed about it a little bit. We made some sentimental comments about how we're sad to see the HCT Seasonal Championships go, but it's not the last of HCT just yet. We still have the World Championship to go. And I just want to say that I want to go out with a bang. I want to give HCT the proper send-off before we switch over to Hearthstone Masters and Hearthstone Grandmasters. And I cannot wait. Even though I'll be a little sad for the next couple days, we're recording this right after we got done with the seasonal championship. Yeah, I'll probably be sad for a couple days, but a lot of still fun stuff to come in the future.
So we have the 16 Worlds players decided, and I think this is really exciting because it might be a preview of what's to come, not just, of course, for the World Championship, but maybe for Hearthstone Grandmasters in the future. We'll see. Let's start things off with the points leaders, TJ. And the reason why I want to start it off is because if we look at the last 2 championships, what do they have in common? Is that the winner of the entire World Championship was a points leader. We had Tom 60229, who led Asia Pacific, and Pavel, who won the last call of Europe back in 2016. And if you go back, Osaka and Firebat, these are 2 players who had to prove themselves over and over despite people not knowing their names. And then they became household names eventually. I think one of these 4 players, TJ, is going to win the World Championship because that's just a trend. You don't get to be the points leader on accident. And I'm going to be very candid. There are some players who went through a championship in the past years. I wouldn't say this year, but in the past years, there's been players who've gone through a seasonal championship And it felt like they got more lucky than because they were actually good.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's none of the case with points leaders ever. Any last call, any points leader situation, those players are all killers. Hunter Ace, Muzzy, Tyler, and Shalty, and they all have championships under their belts. So I'm looking at these 4 to be the core 4 of the entire event.
Yeah, and this season was this year of HCT was kind of tougher than ever when it came to points.
Right.
It was competitive because you had ladder. You also had tour stops, which were cutthroat. You had the same 150 people traveling the world, some of the best players in the world competing for the same pool of points. And with that said, I think that because we had such a competitive year overall, that the points leaders are obvious favorites. But honestly, if we look at the qualifiers for summer, we had Bunny Hopper, Viper, Killing All Day in A8. You have to look at Bunny Hopper and Viper because even though they weren't points leaders in their region, they were still up there in points. And Bunny Hopper almost won 2 HCT championships in a single year.
Right. So did Bloodyface. He almost won 2, got to the finals, and
yeah, I guess.
I mean, look, that's as good as it gets to get into the top 4 multiple times. Bunny Hopper almost won 2 seasons, which would have been absolutely absurd to think about. I was kind of hoping he would win because I brought this story up, I believe, on the last day of broadcast. But Bunny Hopper was the first player that we saw qualify through the open HCT system. We started off with Europe of the winter season in 2016, and he was one of the players that went through. It feels like it was his anime, if you will. He ends up in the final year of the HCT Open seasonal circuit and crushes it. It feels like he finally attains that level of dominance that people should be recognizing him for. So I was really hoping that he would end it with a win because it would be a proper bookend. Like he comes in the first season and then goes through a bunch of setbacks and comes back even stronger. He's also qualified for every single seasonal playoff, and that's also a record held by like a handful of people. Yeah, I think him, Tice,
Noblord.
Well, I was talking about Europe specifically.
Europe,
Europe's like even more competitive too.
Yeah, true.
I think it's just those 2 players that I think off the top of my head. That's just how elite of the elite it is to qualify every season for Europe because it's so freaking competitive. I think Colento is also another player that did.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think he may have missed 1 season.
I think he did miss 1
It's just so difficult to do that.
Yeah. But can never count out Killing All Day.
You can't get out.
We haven't really seen him in 2019. Who knows? It may be the year of Killing All Day.
Yeah. He's still competing. He still goes to tour stops, still hangs out, and he still has a great mind for the game. But, I mean, I think everyone's doing the right thing, A8 included, is to hibernate a little bit. Rekindle that passion because, being very candid, if you just play all day, every day, you eventually lose a little bit of that fire, that flare that really sparks your inspiration. Pacing yourself because it's, in anything, especially in card games, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
So I like that Killing an 8, taking it easy. Viper decided not to be the case. He traveled more after qualifying for Worlds and made another top 8 run at the Hearthstone Championship. So we'll see whose schools of philosophy end up coming on top. Is it Viper, who's constantly engaged and is hungry for more all the time while doing really fun meta-breaking lineups? For better or for worse. Or then we have A8 and Killing All Day who are more chilling and relaxing.
Then from fall we had Language Hacker, Bloodyface, Blood Trail, and Just Saying. Kind of the Americas domination. Similarly, Just Saying, who honestly we can put him in the points leader category because he was the actual
That's true.
He was the actual points leader.
I was talking about
for Americas.
Muzzy, but Just Saying I mean, okay, the reason why I was kind of dismissing that is because Muzzy was the points leader last year.
Yes.
And also in 2016, he was also the #1 points leader, but we didn't invite them directly. They had to play in the top 8, which I believe he lost, unfortunately. So for 3 years, Muzzy's been effectively the points leader in terms of what that role served, but Saiyan is the #1 points leader for NA this year.
Yeah, it's just that the championship top 4 takes precedence over points leader.
So, add him to I said the core 4, but the fantastic 5.
There you go.
Is Just Saying in that mix. I'm just going to keep expanding this club until we hit the Sweet 16.
I mean, they all have a lot of points just naturally from championships, but Blood Trail definitely had a big finish to 2018 with qualifying to the World Championship in fall, and then of course winning Taiwan All Stars. He's got to be a player to watch. And then of course Bloodyface, who even though 20 minutes ago, whatever it was, I said he underperformed. He underperformed based off our expectations of him, but he still got top 4. He's still a world caliber player. And I think language hacker is also kind of a big question for us, because after winning, he didn't do too much. He was never the guy that traveled a lot to tour stops out of North America, and but he did win a championship. That's how he qualified. So we'll have to see how he fares once April rolls around.
Yep. And then in winter we've covered already, but once again, Roger, Jing, Yue, and Ike, the rise of China, the rise of the East, and of course one man to fend them all off, Mr. USA himself, Ike. What's interesting as a statistic is that Americas has the most representation this year at Worlds.
Yeah.
They have 6 players.
Yeah.
So with that, let's go ahead and roll this exciting teaser about the upcoming World Championships.
Sound speeds, camera speed. Scene 1, take 1, Mark.
Words are hard to formulate right now.
Amazing. It's the best feeling ever.
非常开心啊.
I actually didn't think I could make it.
You'll see one turn, I couldn't even count to 5.
This is what I came here to do, and I did it.
I think it's the best day of my life, actually.
想象一下，真的获总冠军就是高举奖杯，然后彩条掉下来，观众在那边呼喊，你觉得这种感觉会是怎么样的？
Tom 60229 is the 2017 Hearthstone World Champion.
We have a new member in the Hall of Champions. Tom 60229 from Taiwan takes the Hearthstone World Championship.
Welcome to the tail end of this episode of TalkStone. We're going to wrap up the World Championship teasers and all that previews with 2 segments that we love here. These are mainstay flagship shoulder content, TJ. We got the well-played moment coming up next. The well-played moment for me was when I got the exciting opportunity to cast a Tiebreaker Tussle between Yue and Definition on the last day. And it wasn't just an average cast, TJ. I was joined by the Omnistone crew. Me, Kibler, and Firebat. And it's a really good well-played moment, DJ, when you have 2.5 of the sharpest minds in Hearthstone, and they are completely baffled about not only what the correct play was, but the outcome and how the comeback was made during Game 2, where Yue Ying was on Odd Rogue up against Hakar Druid from Definition.
Yes.
For Hakar Druid, once they deck out and they kill off their own Hakar, they just have to swap decks with you with King Togwaggle and then naturalize to make you draw the Corrupted Bloods.
Yeah.
Usually, you are powerless in that situation as an aggressive deck because if you can't kill him fast enough, you often don't have many cards. But Yue Ying spots an opportunity to utilize Myra's Unstable Element to fill up his hand. Because if you're holding 10 cards and you draw the Corrupted Blood, that doesn't affect you. It burns, it doesn't shuffle into your deck, and you don't take damage.
Yeah.
And more importantly, you fill up your hand with really powerful resources to pressure. However, Yue Ying went one step deeper because Hakar Druids know that you can burn their Corrupted Blood, so what they end up doing is filling your hand preemptively and then King Togwaggle swap so that you have 0 cards in your deck. And that sets up a mill scenario, a classic fatigue where you just wait for your opponent to wait out the game. And so Yue Ying is able to go to level 2. And then level 3 is be able to figure out what his opponent can do with his remaining cards and set up a counter lethal while pressuring him. And, the coolest part about this play for me, TJ, was that it technically was Definition's game to lose. He had an inevitability win. But because of the amount of mental pressure and the stakes, and because Yue Ying spotted the one possible line for his opponent to mess up, he set this entire scenario up, and it panned out perfectly. And that, in my opinion, decided the series, because it was a very close back and forth. If Definition won this game, he's probably through to the World Championship.
Yeah, and that kind of set the tone for Definition's remaining run in the tournament. But the thing that I liked was just staying calm under that amount of pressure, because Definition was ahead nearly the whole game.
Right.
When this moment happened, he was well above 30 health. I think he was close to 40 with the amount of armor that he had.
Right.
He had an Akar on pretty much an empty board, and you can just play it because he knew that Yue didn't have any type of silence, so he could trade it in at his leisure because he knew that Yue would have to try and put pressure on, and he could wait till his deck was empty to make an easy swap back and kill him with the Bloods. But setting it up to where you can Myras on the same turn that you kill Hakar, and that was the key, right? He had Baku on board,
right,
and he was able to trade into the Hakar the same turn that he was able to Myras and keep his hand at 10. And then even in the following turn, yes, Definition messed up, and he played Togwaggle, which burned the second blood, but Yue had an opportunity to put even more pressure on the board than he did,
right,
but he purposefully kept his hand full enough by just playing Firefly, which just replaces itself, and Fungomancer to keep his hand at 9 so Togwaggle couldn't happen.
Right.
That's the mental pressure you talked about, was also just a fantastic recognition of the situation.
Exactly. And it's fun because myself, Brian Kibler, and Firebat were really confused by what was going on. And to be fair, it's a very complex late game situation. I went back and watched part of the VODs, and a lot of the chat's like, I need someone else to explain this for me. And I feel a little bit bad because I've played the most Hakar Druid out of all three of them, and I still didn't know what was going on. But neither did Definition, and he's the one who brought it to the tournament.
Yeah.
This is a very hard scenario that you don't get yourself into, specifically because, one, not many people are playing Odd Rogue, and two, you're not in that situation where you just don't have an outright inevitability win because you had to math out fatigue scenarios. So this was a very, very complex late game scenario that a lot of players were even wrong on. Like Noblord was tweeting about like what he could have done differently, and he was wrong. Same thing with Bunny Hopper.
Yeah,
and that's what I love when Hearthstone is at its best. When it's these crazy, complicated scenarios that you've never encountered, you have to spontaneously find your way through. And Yue did exactly that masterfully, which booked his ticket to the World Championship.
Yeah, and the solution for Definition was as simple as forgetting everything about his deck, forgetting Hakar, forgetting Tog, and just naturalizing and letting Yu fatigue naturally. So it's like, at the end of the day, the solution was to just not overcomplicate things and just let your Hearthstone knowledge, not your Hakar Druid knowledge, take over.
It's true.
And unfortunately, that was his downfall, but definitely one of the best well-played moments we've had in some time.
Oh, yeah. It was really exciting. The surprise from Firebat and Kibler and myself was very deserved. And we also earned every single possible Sapcaster's comment in the chat because you know what? We definitely will accept that if we can watch games like that more often.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking of Brian Kibler, Dan, now it's time for meme history.
For the last time?
For the last time after a seasonal championship, now it's time for meme history. Dan, why don't you set this one up? Because you are deeply rooted in the history of this dank meme.
So for people who don't know, I used to do a lot of the final card reveal streams for expansion hype. It would be like me and Ben Brode, or like I think I did one with Matt Place back in the day. And we would show off a lot of the expansion that people haven't seen yet by playing another developer. And I did a lot in a row. I did like 5 or 6 of them, starting from like Whispers of the Old Gods. And then people were like, yeah, Fodan's cool, or some people were like, Fodan's not that great. They ended up saying, like, we should invite other people, like Day9, who ended up doing some, and Brian Kibler. So Brian Kibler got a chance to showcase the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion with Ben Brode back in the day. And it was very fun because Kibler is charismatic. He was laughing a lot. He also made a lot of misplays because I got to say it's very difficult to play correctly with cards you've never seen before and you don't know how their interactions mix. So it was fantastic. And I think people were so excited by that breath of fresh air compared to the same old Frodan all the time. Which, a lot of the criticism was warranted, and I took a lot of it to heart. But people were so excited that I think one of Kibler's biggest fans made an entire thread after the reveal stream said, Kibler was great. And the content of the post was just the same sentence repeated, Kibler was great. And the number one voted comment was, Kibler was great. And then the sub replied under that was, Kibler was great. And I just started this entire train where the thread had like 1,000 comments. I'm not even exaggerating. And it was all Kibler was great, or some variation of it in a different language or in binary code. And it was really, really funny to watch that evolve. And now, anytime Kibler does anything, like whether he records his 17th video about Genin Baku, or he's streaming, Dragon Deck or Test Rogue for the 1500th time, or when he's I'm memeing Kibler at this point, or when he just does a great job casting Hearthstone and does a great job being a community pillar in any game he participates in, people just type Kibler was great, and he was. This past weekend, Kibler was great.
He was, and as meme historians, we do have to dig deeper and question ourselves, and question the very core of the meme. And
question the core of the meme.
We have to ask ourselves, was Kibler really great?
Yes.
All right.
No, I don't know. I feel like you're leading me into a path that I don't know exactly where it ends.
No, I'm just trying to.
Was Kibler great? What is being great?
Yeah.
What is Kibler?
And I want, Dan, you to start a Reddit thread for this episode of TalkStone.
It says Kibler was great.
That says Kibler was great.
Right. Well, the funny thing about that is it could apply to anything, even if Kibler's not there.
Yeah.
It is a little bit obnoxious if it's like an appreciation thread for someone else, and then someone just comes in with Kibler was great.
Which has happened before.
Time, like any good meme, timing, time, place, and matter is really important.
I wasn't even thinking about the meme. It wasn't even on my radar when we came in to record TalkStone today.
Yeah.
But you brought it up, and I felt like it was kind of a necessary bit of education for all the meme youngsters out there to get caught up with the times and to truly know that Kibler really was great.
Yeah, for people who might think that, there's some bad blood or something between me, no, there's absolutely none. Me and him are good friends. We hang out even outside of Hearthstone. We talk about a lot of things non-gaming related. I have nothing but respect. I actually look at Kibler as like a mentor to me in some capacities because he's significantly more experienced in all aspects of gaming itself, like game design and theory. And, of course, he's a legendary player and competitor. Nothing but respect for the guy. So I value Kibler extremely highly. I don't want people to misconstrue this as some kind of bitter jealousy of like ironic, like sarcastic. Oh, Kibler was so great. No, I actually mean it. I think Kibler's fantastic, and it was such a good reminder of why he's great. Casting with him and get the championship because I did miss him at playoffs. We didn't have him. We had Derek and Gia, which they do a fantastic job too. It's just it's just not the same without Mr. Brian Kibler of Brian Kibler Gaming.
Yeah. But we hope this edition of Meme History has helped make the Hearthstone community a more inclusive place for all.
So that does it for this episode of TalkStone. Normally we usually ask each other where we're going to see each other next. TJ?
Well, probably the World Championship, but being on the Hearthstone Esports team, we still got a lot of stuff to announce in the coming month.
Even more stuff to announce. That's true. You didn't talk too much about Grandmaster stuff. I think a lot of people are excited, obviously, for the first event in Vegas. Yep. I know I'm excited for that. If you guys are going to the Vegas event, either both as fans or competitors, hit me up. We're going to have a great time.
Yeah.
That's happening in, June? According to the announcement.
June. I had to look quickly
yes. Well, I mean,
at our producer.
Going based off the public. At this point, all the revealed information is what I know as well. So I'm just telling you guys what's already out there. And then at least for me, myself, you might see me at a couple events going into it. I think there are a couple of third-party organizers that are looking to try to do like one last year of the Raven event. So it's going to be good. But, yeah, you'll see me at the World Championships. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. But, look, if you don't bring back the regular ACT cast at the World Championship,
you could say it.
People will riot because Kibler was great.
Yeah. Coming full circle on meme history.
Thanks for watching this episode of TalkStone. If you guys missed any part of the podcast, make sure to check out the video form, twitch.tv/playhearthstone. Or if you're an audio podcast kind of person, make sure to check it out on SoundCloud and iTunes. Until next time, we'll see you in the tavern.